The sitting is resumed.
Order number 14, sir. Order number 14, in the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Barbados National Energy Company Transfer and Vesting of Assets Bill 2025.
Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is a very simple bill. As a matter of fact, I believe that I came to this honourable chamber some time ago advising of the impending amalgamation of the energy companies which the government owns. The government owns two companies in particular, the Barbados National Oil Company, the Barbados National Terminal Company, and the Barbados National Petroleum Corporation. The Barbados National Petroleum Corporation is the company that deals with the matter of retailing of natural gas to residential and to commercial customers. And these three entities we did share were meant to be amalgamated into a single entity called the Barbados National Energy Company. The Barbados National Energy Company was created and then launched on April 1 of this financial year. And we took the time because even though many people see the BNOCL a lot of times more so than they often see the NPC, a little known fact, even to many in government, is that NPC was the parent company and BNOCL was the subsidiary of the NPC created by under the Companies Act. And so now what is happening is that the legislation that established the National Petroleum Corporation, here the National Petroleum Corporation Act, Cap 280, is being repealed, and the MPC and its assets and liabilities are being vested in the already created, already functioning, and already established company known as the Barbados National Energy Company. Now, the legislation simply attempts to treat to the way in which that vesting is taking place. In the first instance, Mr. President, it does the definitions. Obviously, there's a board of directors, the company. It speaks to the products of the company. Then it moves on to the transfer of the assets, liabilities, and contracts also into that company. And then it speaks about the functions of the company. We know what those functions are listed at clause 4.1. And then, Mr. President, it speaks about things that is share capital. Obviously, the government of Barbados is the shareholder in this instance, and the government has held 100% of the issued shares of the company under the Companies Act. And then it speaks to one of the most important matters that resulted in the delay from April 1 till now, which is the question of staffing. And so the employees who are members, those persons who are members of staff of the corporation, they now are being transitioned over to the BNECL. And the key and most important point, and at this point I want to express my sincere appreciation to the entire amalgamation team. The amalgamation team has included representatives of the Barbados Workers Union. We have had representation as well from the National Union of Public Workers, both of whom are on record as representatives of the company. We also have, Mr. President, the Barbados Employers Confederation that played a not too insignificant role in the facilitation of the process, as well as the members of the board and the members of the management and staff of the organization who took the responsibility on to facilitate this structural transformation, because that's what this is about. At clause 7, it speaks about pension rights, and this is one of the key things that was integrated into the discussions, Mr. President, ensuring that you are preserving the rights and terms and conditions of our staff on terms that are no less favorable than those which they currently enjoy, and to ensure that their pension rights are also preserved, Mr. President. And so we have all of those provisions captured at clause 7.1 in the draft of the legislation. The provision at clause 8, which is the normal exemption from payment of transfer tax on the transfer of the assets here. And then in order to protect our employees at clause 9, it attempts to ensure that persons who engage in behavior which can be problematic as it relates to employees of the company, that they are deemed to have committed an offense if they obstruct or hinder an employee or an agent of the company in the normal conduct of their operations as permitted by the legislation. There are a number of, not too many, however, of consequential amendments. The first and the most important one is to facilitate the transitioning into a commercial state-owned enterprise. As colleagues would recall, in 2019, we came to this place and we approved a piece of legislation called the Public Finance Management Act. The Public Finance Management Act has in its schedule, both in the first instance, provisions for the responsibilities of state-owned enterprises and then for commercial state-owned enterprises. And it assigns a number of duties and responsibilities under the PMFA, and the schedule that we are seeing appended to this legislation, vesting the assets of the MPC into the BNECL, relate to those obligations which we passed in 2019. This is the simple institutional matter relating to this bill, Mr. President, and it will provide, as I have said, under the provisions of the Companies Act, which fall under the ministry, which I'm responsible for, as well under Business Barbados, to vest the National Petroleum Corporation, which falls under the Energy Division of the ministry, for which I'm also responsible, to vest the assets of this company into the BNECL. And once we have been able to look at the structure, and I hope approve the passing of this piece of legislation, Mr. President, Barbados will officially have the National Petroleum Corporation vested in the entity that we created, known as the Barbados National Energy Company. And with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to all fellow senators. Thank you to the Minister, Senator Cummins, for her brief introduction to this bill. Mr. President, in theory, we do not have any objections to the passing of the bill to dissolve MPC into the Barbados National Energy Company. But what it does give me the opportunity to do is to spend a little time on the energy sector in the country, Mr. President. And from time to time, we've all listened and we've all read numerous articles in the paper from said Minister Cummins about how things are going in the sector from their perspective. So I want to use my few moments to just shed our perspective of how things are going and our opinions on where we think things should be at this juncture. So I start first by saying, and it was said in previous debates or discussions, that this whole focus to reposition and strengthen the energy sector is nothing new to Barbados. Actually, in 2017, the DRP presented a Barbados National Energy Policy 2017 to 2037. And the goal then was to reposition the sector over time to achieve a few things, Mr. President. And if I read from that document that was clearly laid in this House before, just a few of the visionary goals that were identified at the time. Visionary goal 1 was diversity, an energy sector that offers a diversity of sustainable energy options with a trajectory towards 100%. Visionary goal number 2 was efficiency, an energy sector where consumption and production of energy resources occur with the maximum level of efficiency feasible. Visionary goal number 3, affordability, an energy sector that offers basic energy products and services that are affordable to local citizens. And the last one I'll read, Mr. President, is visionary goal number 4, reliability, an energy sector that offers continuous and reliable supply of energy. So back then the vision was, and there were 8 goals, visionary goals identified in that energy policy, 2017 and 2037, so it was a 20-year policy position that the government then took. And it had some core values attached to it as well. And I'll read just a few as well, starting with the first one, which it says stability, price, regulatory, and technical. Then it said reliability, including continued access to energy. And third one listed out of a list of maybe 12, efficiency in the production and consumption of all energy resources. It also identified what the intended mix of energy was and the targets to achieve those. And by 2037, we wanted to have a 75% reduction in heavy fossil fuel. Mr. President. So the then administration had intended to do a few things, to merge the different entities as the minister has identified and has done with the establishment of the Barbados National Energy Company Limited. And that was to combine and strengthen its existing capabilities, to improve management efficiency and effectiveness, and establish a succession plan using existing staff with institutional knowledge. And finally, to create a broader operational scope with better organization structure. So the plan for BNECL, the merged company, was to diversify its revenue as well through renewable energy initiatives and innovation, finance and install solar systems on government buildings, sell electricity to the national grid under the Fair Trading Commission approval pricing, and just work with the Ministry of Housing, Mr. President, or property owners for suitable financial arrangements. And one of the key things that the then government established as a priority was to support customers and the national transition in a whole. Explore ways to assist domestic consumers and small micro businesses in transitioning from natural gas to affordable energy sources, and to focus on keeping energy costs low during the national shift to renewables. So, Mr. President, I just recapped that to add to some context of where our last administration would have left or the energy policy or the energy framework to be taken into the future. The intended plan was a well-informed plan, taking a gradual process. In other words, we set out a time limit to achieve those goals over time. In this case, it was a 20-year timeline was identified. Achievable milestones to reduce fossil fuels by 75% over that period. Financially attainable, Mr. President, and lastly, customer focused, which means that if you listen to the core values and some of the initiatives or the core values coming out of what I said before, focus on keeping energy costs low during the national shift to renewables. Obviously, we did not have an opportunity to continue on this mandate, Mr. President, as you know. And this government came in and they put a subsequent plan in place. And, Mr. President, when I looked at the plan in place by the government, I think it was the Barbados Energy Plan for 2011 to 2030. The substance of the plan was based, as was identified, with a lot of the work that was done during the previous administration and the previous report, which stemmed from the previous report. So largely it was a lot of copy and paste. The substance of the report was a lot of copy and paste from the previous plan that was established in 2017. What the government did, though, is that they changed the targets. So they moved from a 20-year plan down to 11 years, which is extremely aggressive. And I'm not sure in terms of the full case studies and discussions that went into determining the time frame for the plans, but that is one identifiable thing that they did that was major. The second thing that they did that was major is they moved the targets down very aggressively as well. So when we had a 75% reduction in fossil fuels over 20 years, they had identified 100% renewables in only 11 years. And what also came up to me when I started to review and compare the two plans was that the government kind of pivoted, and it almost looked as though they changed the focus from being customer focused to investment focused. And I support that by saying, with the inclusion of in their vision statement and their core goals, they included two more initiatives, one being economic enfranchisement. In their core values, Mr. President, the first core value was economic enfranchisement. So, in my opinion, Mr. President, you started to see somewhat of a shift from a customer perspective in terms of working with consumers through the transition, controlling costs, being patient, being gradual, and having a sustained improvement into a more urgent, immediate, and kind of like a concept of having everything done almost overnight, Mr. President, but with a different focus, which was about investment. So from a well-informed, gradual plan, calculated, and managed process, we have now seen over the last 6 years, we have seen a shift to incorrect focus, in my opinion, some misguided priorities, lofty, unattainable goals, as is the result of today, financial blundering, as is the result of today in the sector, which all culminates to mass confusion. A plan, Mr. President, that I think we can all say has failed thus far. Now, why do I say that they have failed, Mr. President? Because investment has been locked out of the grid. And the government promoted heavy investment since 2019. There is no more capacity to take in the energy at the grid. For more than 2 years, solar panels have been installed on roofs, inverters ready, nowhere to send the power. Approximately $500 million has been reported as being locked out of investment that's already been spent, has been locked out, Mr. President. So the government overpromised and under-delivered with their promises. And what makes matters worse, and why I say they have failed, Mr. President, is then when you have promised persons to invest their money, and then they are getting no return, but they are paying back debt. What do you do when they cry out to you? So the government had to facilitate, in some form, refinancing of those facilities that persons borrowed from or were unable to repay or had to repay without even earning an investment back, a return back from their investments. But what is interesting about the whole refinancing facility, Mr. President, is that it excludes residential customers. So if a householder, Mr. President, if you, myself, or any of our senators here have put solar panels on our roofs and we were unable to connect to the grid in a certain time, and we were not selling our energy to the grid, we will not be compensated for our losses. So in this instance, the refinancing facility only deals with businesses, which is very unfair to those persons who are also part of the process of this government encouraging people to participate in the renewable energy sector. Mr. President, why do I say that it has failed? Because imports of fossil fuel today are still high. It is reported that the government imported 760,862 barrels of gasoline in 2018. In 2024, the government imported 775,310 barrels of gasoline. In other words, Mr. President, the usage is the same. It's actually more than it was in 2018, which is a sign that we are going nowhere with the transition, Mr. President. In addition, we spent $712 million to import to import fuel in the country in 2018, and we're up to $1 billion in 2024, Mr. President. All signs that we are going nowhere, but this government is going nowhere, but very fast. Mr. President, why do I say that they have failed? Because, again, as I identified before, the previous administration in its policy was very customer focused, working with customers through the transition, keeping the cost affordable. Light bills are getting higher, Mr. President. And why are light bills getting higher? Because actually from December 2024, the Barbados Light and Power Company actually reports on its website the cost of its energy from the different sources. And we have seen since December of 2024 up to October of 2025 that the Barbados Light and Power is paying more for renewable energy than it is paying for fossil fuel. As much as 34% higher in some months, May and June to be specific, but the average is around 15% more. And that is affecting the light bills of our regular homeowners and obviously those who are into doing business. These are just some of the facts, Mr. President, why, without being too contentious, I'm just saying that the government has failed on its thrust, on its renewable thrust, changing from a model of taking time, being measured, well managed, to cutting time, being very aggressive, and mismanaging, Mr. President. So, with the merger, first of all, it took 6 years to actually form the company, to actually do the merger of those 3 entities that now fall under the Barbados National Energy Company Limited. So, it is nothing to be impressed about. It is nothing for the government to gloat about. We are actually seem to be in a worse position than we were when we first started this whole project. But as it relates to the company itself, the Barbados National Energy Company Limited, I just have a few questions, a few concerns. And when you merge 3 companies, Mr. President, and you say you want to be more efficient, you want to be more focused, first of all, you have 3 companies that are doing similar activities within these 3 companies, and you don't merge the 3. But you say that there will be no loss of jobs. So how are you going to get the efficiencies? And that is just a simple question to the minister. What is the business structure that will be in place that will allow everybody to function efficiently, that we do get the benefits with a merged system? Because you have different separate companies bringing similar positions, similar roles, all under one company. I don't foresee that as an issue in terms of the staff, but there has been no public cry from the staff at the entities discussed. But were there meetings with the staff to discuss the individual officials within the company, Mr. President? Although there's no legal requirement, were staff offered voluntary separation packages so that we could help rationalize the structure of efficiency at the amalgamated company, Mr. President? Is the entity repositioned for success? That is the simple question. Is it really being repositioned for success? Or is it just merely on paper? Is it just about creating a new website? Is it about creating a few sound bites by the minister at her conferences that she visits? Does the minister have any physical evidence to show that progress has been made, Mr. President? I have just outlined the things that we know that are happening in the sector. Investment locked out, government stepping in to help refinance the investment that was overpromised or under-delivered. Fossil fuel imports still high, more than in 2017, 2018. and electricity costs going up to households, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, after 6 years, what real progress has been made? That is my simple question to the Minister, to the Chamber today. And while we understand, and while we started this move in the last administration, we are very concerned that it's gone nowhere. And I'm asking the government to pull back, to reassess, to readjust, and be realistic in their goals. Be managed, be patient, but we have to be going forward because we are starting over again 6 years down the road, Mr. President. Investment now has to be connected. Light bills are going up, and the thought of battery storage is on the horizon, which is likely to carry the bills even more. So, Mr. President, with those words, with those few questions, that is my contribution on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. Are there any other speakers on this bill? If not, Senator Cummins, please wind up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I want to thank the Honourable Speaker who preceded me for his questions. I am going to respond to them, and because I anticipated where you would go, I restricted my opening remarks to the bill itself to give you an opportunity to say all that you say on energy, which is your usual soundbite. So I will take the opportunity to respond to you. Now, as I mentioned before in my opening, there are 3 companies that constitute the energy apparatus of the government. The Barbados National Terminal Company, which sits at Ferry Valley in Christchurch, which is the terminal company. It stores in huge tanks all of the fuels imported into the country, principally. That facility is connected to the Oistins facility, and it does not store them in barrels. Gasoline is not accounted for either gasoline is also not imported or stored in this country in barrels. And so the Barbados National Terminal Company has the facilities for, you responded to an aside or something that the speaker said?
I want to raise Senator Walters.
On a point of order, Mr. President, I did not suggest that we are storing barrels or any such thing. I said that the Barbados government, through its entity, imported, and I quoted the amount of barrels that was imported into the country, as per the report from the Barbados National Oil Company, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters.
Mr. President, the honourable member should address any queries that have been raised by the speaker and not by asides on points of order. So, Mr. President, the institution at Ferry Valley in Christchurch stores ultra-low sulfur diesel, heavy fuel oil, crude oil, and it also has aviation fuel, jet fuel, kerosene, used for the purpose of kerosene on the one hand and servicing the facility at Sewell for aircraft. Now, that facility serves as the storage and the distribution arm of the companies. The Barbados National Oil Company functions as what we call the marketing arm of the entity. It is responsible for contracting, procurement, the logistics, the shipping, and then the local distribution of fuel products. It has relationships with the majors, what we call the oil majors, with whom they maintain relationships, whether it be at the Holborn facility, where there is an extensive storage facility in partnership with Sol, whether in other instances it is also in another facility at Spring Garden Trent with the Barbados Light and Power, but it supplies fuels to all of the majors as well. At the Ferry Valley facility, you will oftentimes see fuel trucks pulling up, and they load up at the terminal company, and then they go and they come up to your local gas station in your community, and they fill up your gas station so you can take your cars and fill at the pump. Those two entities very differentiated what we call the difference between upstream and downstream in the energy sector. They are vertically integrated, but they are differentiated companies. The Barbados National Oil Company also owns the onshore oil fields. We have a total of around over 255 onshore oil wells. There are around 80 of them or so that have been in active production, and over 50 something that are there for enhanced recovery at this point, which now produce for Barbados locally both oil and gas. Many times for summer camp, and this summer we had, Mr. President, a summer camp where we took kids to be able to see what oil production looks like. And they were stunned to realize that right here in Barbados, sometimes when they drive by on the road, they see these huge things up in the air, and they don't know what they relate to, but they were able to see where the Barbados National Oil Company, the owner of the oil fields in some instances, and they have leased relationships with whom they pay royalties to private landowners where oil has been found. The National Petroleum Corporation, however, procures natural gas only. It does not engage in any procurement. It does not own any oil fields. It does not have any storage facilities. It does not engage in any marketing or any procurement externally. They are three vertically integrated companies operating in both the upstream and the downstream of energy production and energy sales, Mr. President. So, it is incorrect to say that they are all similar companies doing the same things, because they're all very differentiated. And because they're very differentiated, when we started this process, and when I assumed this chair 2 years ago now, the Inter-American Development Bank, and I'm thankful to the Honourable Member for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit more broadly than the legislation would have allowed, but the Inter-American Development Bank gave the Ministry of Energy the ability, by way of technical assistance, to undertake an assessment of all of the companies, the BNTCL, the Barbados National Oil Company, and the Barbados National Petroleum Corporation. We knew when we started this amalgamation, every employee in every company and how they overlapped and how they were meant to interact with each other. That was done as part of an overall change management process. It doesn't take 2 days or a week or a month when dealing with people. And the reason you have not seen a call out in this way is because we have engaged with a sensitivity for people. When in April 1, the BNTCL and the BNOCL were amalgamated and the new company created, there were meetings. We did not come to the unions after the fact to ask them, what do you think about this? We created an amalgamation committee, and we embedded the unions on the amalgamation committee so that they had a seat at the table along the way and not after the fact. We brought on board the Barbados Employers Confederation because they were experts in industrial relations and people management, so they too were a part of the process. We did not arrive at this lightly. We took the structure and the people together into a consideration. When in April 1, I came to this chamber and I spoke about the amalgamation of the Barbados National Terminal Company and the Barbados National Oil Company into BNECL. At the time, we had met with and spoken with, and I personally had joined the team as well to engage with the team at the management level and in all small groups as well, so that people were able to ask any questions which they had. They were to feel no inhibitions. They were to be able to open up about their concerns and their constraints. And between April and now, under the leadership of the management and the change management team, but more importantly, in partnership and collaboration with the labor unions, there was a concerted effort to make sure that under the leadership of the BEC, that any issues that had been raised were either being addressed or that the assurance was being given that they would be addressed in due course if it was something that would take a longer time. And that's okay. And so we delayed folding MPC into the BNECL in April 1 in order to allow for it to be done correctly, taking time and doing it properly in laziness, and it isn't wasting time. We took the time to do it properly. Now, I want to also make the point, Mr. President, that the role of MPC as differentiated from the other two companies is in the retail of natural gas. The retail of natural gas. They do nothing else but retail natural gas. There is a natural gas infrastructure pipeline, both transmission and distribution. It is connected to the facility in the Christchurch St. Philip area, and you typically would have these transmission lines running all the way down to the west coast of the hotel belt. All the way up, you will see, Mr. President, over the course of the last year, 2-3 years, under the previous government, they started this work, and this government expanded and continued the work for the natural gas replacement project. In the same way for water, Mr. President, that you have what we call unaccounted for water because there are leakages in pipes that are over 60+ years old, the same thing applied for gas. And we had to take the decision to make some changes in the natural gas infrastructure. That is the role of the NPC. Differentiated, downstream, upstream, all energy. And so this entity, Mr. President, is now being amalgamated into the Barbados National Energy Company. It is meant, yes, to create the efficiencies of which the Honourable Member spoke, and I agree, the efficiencies. We have mapped what that is. I regret, Mr. President, that the change manager that we brought on board, I think a few of us were at his funeral, Roger Hennis, who passed a few months ago. He was on board and he anchored the change management, and we have been in the process of recruiting and onboarding a successor, done so respectfully, having lost the last person who died, and so we're now making sure that we have a dedicated person embedded, because we believe in the philosophy, and the Prime Minister sometimes she only needs to tell me once one time, or say it to somebody else one time. I hear it and I've accepted it. She says somebody needs to be coming to work every day to deal with these things. I can't run it from in the ministry. So who is coming to work every day to deal with this? That person was Roger Hennis. Rest his soul, he has passed on, and we are now in the process of having a person who will take the helm in his stead. Mr. President, the other three things that were raised by the Honourable Member spoke about what we intend to do. The intention when the amalgamation was framed, and the legislation doesn't speak to all of it, but obviously there is an entire business plan, there is a strategic plan, and there is a roadmap that has been rolled out. The intention, Mr. President, is that the company remains as it is now, a wholly owned subsidiary of the government of Barbados, a wholly owned company of the government of Barbados, but that some of the business lines would evolve into, in some instances, a blend of capital between government resources and private sector capital only in special purpose vehicles specific to projects or programs that need to be done, but that the company would remain a Barbados government-owned company. I want to correct a little bit, not of the statement, but of the concern. We accept, Mr. President, I know I certainly do, that the refinancing facility does cover businesses, but certain businesses. And the Honourable Member, besides prices, speaks most times on matters relating to small businesses. And I would expect that the Honourable Member would be very happy to hear that there is a refinancing facility to cater to small businesses who have projects below $1 million, because that is the demographic that it focuses on. But let me just put this into context, Mr. President. Also, under the Democratic Labour Party administration, the Smart Energy Fund was created. The Smart Energy Fund was created to be able to put solar panels, as was read by the Honourable Member, on buildings and to provide a facility for small businesses. These funds, Mr. President, procured originally under the Democratic Labour Party and not fully utilized, were simply repurposed to allow for a refinancing facility to benefit the same community because they found themselves with distressed assets. And it is because of the structure of the financing that it focuses specifically on the demographic that the Inter-American Development Bank and the European Union provided these funds to support. And so this is the structure of the refinancing facility to cater to small, medium-sized enterprises. Now, Mr. President, we also want to make sure that we address the query that was raised about the difference between RE and fossil fuels. Now, Mr. President, globally, and today I haven't done the numbers, but globally you have seen the volatility, and we all know the volatility in fossil fuel prices. There is a question, Mr. President, about whether or not fossil fuels are cheaper or more expensive to generate electricity from. But I would be surprised if I heard a government, especially a previous government, that takes credit for what we then are being told we cut and paste with an original energy policy that acknowledged in its then policy that fossil fuels did not make Barbados energy independent, but it made us vulnerable to that volatility and to the exigencies of international changes that that same government would not want this country to focus instead on that which we have control of and have a renewable resource. And so, yes, in principle, we have a 2030 target, but I believe that I have shared in this honorable chamber that in March of this year, the Barbados government adopted under the Ministry of Energy's leadership an energy transition investment plan. We simply looked at the 2019 energy policy. We looked at the sectors. We simulated using econometric analysis and multi-criteria analysis, all the things that the economists and the engineers would have looked at to make a determination as to, one, what would it take for Barbados to transition to 100% renewable energy and to move away from fossil fuels. In that energy transition investment plan, it acknowledged that the upfront cost of capital expenditure for the transition would have a cost associated with it, and that over time, once those costs were recovered, costs would come down, and they could come down. That is the reality of the renewable energy sector. The capex that you have to put in, you have to recover the costs in the first instance, but once you have recovered those costs, then you can expect to see the prices go down. Equally so, Mr. President, we then looked at sector by sector by sector what the cost of investment would be to be able to facilitate a transition. And we did a couple of scenarios. We landed on 3 scenarios, Mr. President. One, if we were to do nothing, business as usual, keep doing what we were doing, bien ECL as it is now or bien OCL as it was then, importing $1 billion on an annual basis in fossil fuels. Fossil fuels to go to the Barbados Light and Power. Fossil fuels to go to MPC, specifically natural gas, to come to residential customers and to commercial customers. What would it cost Barbados if we did nothing? What we found, Mr. President, was that the cost was exorbitant. Doing nothing based on our modeling was not an option. So then we saw what it would cost us if we were to go with a 2030 timeline, as the honorable member has referred to, which was an accelerated timeline. We looked at that timeline, Mr. President, and then we saw what that cost. And then we said, but hold on, if we were to push these timelines out a little further, what would it cost us? And Barbados adopted in March of 2025, and it has widely been published and announced and spoken about in multiple publications, and anyone who has not seen it has not looked, because it has been widely circulated and the media has reported on it multiple times. And I know that all of our colleagues read the newspaper every day from cover to cover and don't just pick out the pieces that suit their narrative. So they must have seen that in March of 2025, Barbados launched a national energy policy that has a transition timeline of 2035 for realization of the net zero targets. So, Mr. President, that allows Barbados then to be able to look at the chunky, bulky investment. And this is where I then want to collide with a commentary on consumers versus investors versus residential versus small homeowners versus small businesses. They all go together. We do not live in an either-or world, Mr. President. We live in an in addition to world. And so the reality of it is that all of these things have to go into a pot, which the economists and the social scientists model, and they try to find the balance. And you know what they use to find the balance, Mr. President? They use a document called the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan. That Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan is followed by the Barbados National Energy Company. It is followed by the Barbados Light and Power Company. It is followed by our development partners. It is followed by the commercial partners, Mr. President, because it maps out our energy mix. It maps out how much gas, how much solar PV, how much wind, how much base load, how much onshore, how much offshore, how much biomass, how much of everything. And then it tells you what the cost of that is likely to be in the Energy Transition Investment Plan, and that becomes the roadmap and the framework that we use, Mr. President. And I want to close off my response to the Honourable Member by saying this. If I work in a hamburger restaurant, Mr. President, I buy burgers, and my refrigerator can absorb and can store and hold 100 burgers. But my suppliers want to sell me 500 burgers. There comes a point where I have to either make a decision to open a new facility, to open new chillers and new refrigeration capacity to be able to absorb my supplier's provision, but I have to match that, Mr. President, with the demand of my customers. I have to be able to match that, Mr. President, with how much my customers are equally willing to pay if I buy 500 when I only actually really need 100, Mr. President. I need to be able to figure out how much money I have in my account to purchase those 500 if I want to buy those 500, Mr. President, and if I'm going to buy it on debt, if I'm going to buy it on equity, or if I'm going to use my own resources to be able to get it. I, as a business, if I'm selling hamburgers, have to make those decisions. Those decisions are no different if you are dealing with $100, $200, $100 million, perhaps even more careful if you're doing it with a country. And so the question of how the grid now has 107 megawatts on it, 103 renewables coming on board, and we have an excess capacity of persons wanting to sell the Barbados Light and Power more than the grid can absorb because of the push for the renewable energy transition is a reality that I am certain every hamburger vendor can understand. And so, Mr. President, what is happening at this point is that the Barbados Light and Power Company, together with all of the energy partners, have been working through the imminent yes of the Barbados Battery Energy Storage System. And I'm happy to say today, having been given the opportunity in a way that I would not have taken otherwise, but thank you for going wide, I would not have taken it, but we passed in this chamber the Electricity Supply Act, and that Supply Act needed regulations. Those regulations have now been approved by Cabinet, have now been gazetted last Friday, and are now in operation to support the Electricity Supply Act. And with the gazetting of that Electricity Supply Act regulatory regime, we are in a position by the end of this month to publish Barbados's first battery energy storage system request for proposals for 60 megawatts of battery storage to be able to unlock that 500 megawatts of $100 million trapped in the banking system. That is what we have taken the time to do, and to do properly. Because, Mr. President, we know you can't win If you bring the legislation, it's rushed, it's sloppy. If you take your time, it takes too long. If you do it thoroughly and you consult who you talk to, you didn't talk to us. And if you don't talk to people, who did you speak with? So we accept that you can't win. So we take the time to do it thoroughly and properly because I welcome the scrutiny. That is important and I value it, Mr. President. So what I can say is that by the end of October, the request for proposals for battery energy storage systems will be launched, now that the regs have been approved, and that by early November, within the second week of November, the equally important Lambert's project, which takes us now more away from solar PV and into wind and into other forms of technologies, we will be launching in collaboration with the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank for Barbados' first onshore, large-scale, utility-scale wind farm with the International Financial Corporation in the second week of November. So, Mr. President, we are committed. We're committed to doing it thoroughly. We're committed to doing it in a way that balances bulky investment. We are committed to doing it in a way that protects consumers. We are committed to doing it in a way that creates space for householders. We are committed to doing it in a way that creates space for small and medium-sized enterprises. We are, Mr. President, so much committed to these principles that embedded in the Lambert's project is for Barbados to have its very first renewable energy unit trust that makes people have an opportunity to buy shares in large projects. So typically when you see large-scale projects, you see one investor, two investors, three investors maybe partnering, they're friends, they've figured out what they want to do, and they have the liquidity, they have the access to capital, and they do it. This government, because of the enfranchisement, this government, because of the empowerment, this government, because of the inclusion, this government, because of the people-centered leadership, has embedded a unit trust for renewable energy in the Lambert's wind farm to make certain that ordinary Barbadians, alongside investors, not either or, in addition to, along with, have the ability to invest in our renewable energy assets and resources in this country. Mr. President, this bill before us today is about the vesting of the MPC into the BNECL. The BNECL is a part of a much broader vision where government's commercial agenda for the renewable energy transition will take place. The Barbados National Energy Company then takes responsibility, Mr. President, for, and we have vested in the Barbados National Energy Company, the responsibility for the special purpose vehicle in which Lambert's has been vested. The National Petroleum Corporation, when it first started, Mr. President, we started Lambert's, had in its possession a series of met masts. Those met masts have been used over the last year to create a wind study and to be able to assess the wind speeds. We now are able to implement on the basis of the integration of the MPC and the BNECL and Barbados government and the IFC even before the actual vesting by way of legislation took place. And so with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummins. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Honourable, the Senate is now in committee.
Seat with permission, sir. Take a minute thoughts.
Permission granted.
1 to 6.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 through 6 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 6 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 7 through 11.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clauses 7 through 11 do not stand part.
The question is that clauses 7 through 11 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye?
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the pass of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Barbados National Energy Company Limited Transfer and Vesting of Assets Act 2025.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Barbados National Energy Company Limited Transfer and Vesting of Assets Act 2025. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, order number 7. Order number 7 in the name of Honourable Minister. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Copyright Bill 2025.
Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is not an insignificant bill. It's a short bill, but it's not an insignificant bill, Mr. President. From as far back as 2021, the Cabinet of Barbados has been navigating this particular bill. Honourable members of the Senate would recall that there was a time where a previous version of this bill was on the order paper. On the other place, it was withdrawn, and there were changes that were made, and this bill is a new bill that has come back to the Honourable Chamber. Now, in 2021, what we were navigating at the time was a series of recommendations coming from the Advisory Committee on Intellectual Property and the Law Reform Commission. They specifically had a couple of things that they wanted to recommend, and one of those things that they raised at the time was that 70 years should be the period for which copyright in any literary, dramatic, musical, or artistic work or database subsists at the following the end of the calendar year in which the author passes. The Chief Parliamentary Counsel at the time looked at those recommendations along with those of the Advisory Committee on IP, and there were new drafting instructions submitted to the ministry that I have the responsibility of leading in 2023. We then took the opportunity, Mr. President, to make sure, as we do all the time, it is my leadership style, and my staff understands it, consult, 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 engage, engage, engage. And so we took responsibility at the time for then sending this piece of legislation back out to the original consultant. And I want to thank him for his work on the legislation. Mr. President, I won't call his name here, but I will take the opportunity to thank him. He knows who he is on this original piece of legislation. He's now retired. He's quite happily enjoying his life, but he still has taken the time to do this work for us. We then also took responsibility for consulting with local IP experts, and with your leave, Mr. President, I do want to acknowledge them since there are locals in this instance. One is Miss Fiona Hines, Senior Counsel, and she is an IP expert in her own right, and she took responsibility for looking over the changes that we have made. And I also want to recognize the work and the input of Dr. Erica Smith of COSGAP, who also shared her input. We would not have brought this bill and relayed this bill without ensuring that we had consulted with the stakeholders. And so, Mr. President, the copyright bill of 2025 before us now does a couple of things, and I want to go over what they are. One, it expands the category of individuals who can hold a copyright to include producers, performers, and licensing bodies. New provisions have been included in this bill enumerating what those rights are for those new persons so that they can exploit their creative art, their works, and protect their works against infringement. We are in the season of NIFCA. We've just come out of Carifesta. Before that, we came out of Crop Over. We're going to go into the season, Mr. President, of Food and Rum. All of those things represent Barbados' cultural and creative heritage. And so the ability to make sure we protect works is important. It allows in the legislation, Mr. President, as well for the expansion of the definition of works. In the existing legislation, works is defined as, in Section 2, as a literary, dramatic, musical, or artistic work. A sound recording, B, film, broadcast, or cable program, and C, the typographical arrangement of the published edition. This definition did not, we found, take into account modern and technological advancement as they relate to databases. So this new legislation takes into account the definition of works, bringing in line Article 5 of the World Copyright Treaty, and therefore it allows for detailed descriptions of the rights associated with computer programming. When these pieces of legislation originally were crafted, when these treaties were crafted, there was no such thing as AI. It didn't exist, and so we now need to make sure that we have the protections around our partners, our creatives, Mr. President. Under Section 10 of the original Act, a copyright in the same areas that I just spoke about exists for the life of the author for only 50 calendar years after his death. I have just spoken about that in my opening, Mr. President, and so the provisions were amended to bring them into line with the wording of Article 7.5 of the Berne Convention and Article 1.4 of the World Copyright Treaty. And so therefore we now move from 50 years to 70 years after the death of the author. In the existing legislation also, Mr. President, only traditional means of reproducing and transmitting works were recognized. Obviously, we now have a very different dynamic. There were two-dimensional works before. Now we have an entirely different scenario with the digital age. And so the methods of reproducing and transmitting have changed. And so the Copyright Bill of 2025 takes these changes into account. And it includes, for the first time, recognition of Wi-Fi as a means of transmitting works and databases and as a means of recording. In Section 2 of the legislation, it defines what broadcast and broadcasting would mean, and it means that it now has been amended to include transmission by wireless telegraphy, including by terrestrial or satellite means of visual images, sounds, or other information, or any combination of these representations. So we have also brought it into alignment with the treaties that I mentioned before, and we have then made changes to the existing legislation. We also want to talk about, Mr. President, very briefly, the expansion of the rights of the copyright owner. If you are the owner of a copyright, of an artistic work, and you are the copyright holder, the rights now allow for you to include the exclusive right to determine how you want your work to be communicated with the public. So Senator King, Mr. President, who is a vocalist, he now has the opportunity under this legislation, under the section that speaks about communication to the public, to include making available to the public in the work in a way that allows members of the public to access it from a place and time chosen by them. This allows for you to take into account sharing, downloading, streaming of works or data in ways that do not fall within the ambit of the traditional and the now antiquated definition of broadcasting. There are penalties for the circumvention of technological measures. Those are there, Mr. President. And then finally, there is the Section 10 of the Section 110 of the existing Act, which provides for the Copyright Tribunal. That has also been updated, Mr. President, and we now have extended authority to the tribunal to affix the amount of shares or remuneration between the copyright owner and performers, like Senator King. And so, Mr. President, these are the items that have been amended in the new piece of legislation over and above the existing piece of legislation. And it seeks to ensure that we, for the first time, Mr. President, bring our intellectual property legislation into the modern era. It is as simple, but yet as important as that. And I want to take the opportunity to say here again that I am very happy that my ministry has had the opportunity to proceed to do this work, to bring this into the modern era. But I also want to say that we have not stopped here. Under my ministry, we have taken the decision already that the Intellectual Property Advisory Committee that gave us this body of work will be re-established, and that the Intellectual Property Agency, which has now been established as a formal sub-brand under Business Barbados, is to be established in the coming weeks. And what do I mean by that, Mr. President? Now, under the entity that was once known as KIPO, Mr. President, the KIPO used to have a registrar, and the registrar was the registrar of companies, and she was the registrar of intellectual property, all in one. And the model had long evolved where those two things needed to be separated. There needed to be a registrar with responsibility for intellectual property, and there needed to be a registrar for companies. Those two roles have now been separated, and we have created in the Business Barbados model the creation of a role for a director of intellectual property, and they will head the Intellectual Property Agency as a sub-brand of Business Barbados. That agency, along with the advisory committee which will guide it on policy matters, will take responsibility for making sure that Barbados, who will now follow Jamaica and Trinidad in separating out these two roles and treating the intellectual property as a designated discipline and a sector for development, that Barbados will now have an opportunity to grow the intellectual property industry, to be able to invest in the creative industry, to grow heritage, Mr. President, but also to look at the commercial opportunities for innovation, for intellectual property exploitation, and Mr. President, to be able to create and to give protection, most importantly, to our artists, our artisans, and our creators of creative works, Mr. President. This is an important body of work, and I want to commend it to this honorable chamber. It has been my absolute honor to work with the team that created this and to be able to begin the process of shepherding new intellectual property legislation into Barbados. And I give the commitment to this chamber and to the public that this is just the start of the body of work, but that we have undertaken to work very closely with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. WIPO has been here with us earlier up in the year for several weeks, working on us setting up our technology platforms to be able to service pieces of work just like this. And so we commit to continuing our work with WIPO. World Intellectual Property Day is coming up very early next month, and we are very pleased that Barbados, we hope, will be in a position to enter World Intellectual Property Day with a modern piece of copyright legislation. And with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. Any speakers? There being none. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't be long, but it would be remiss of me not to at least say a few words on this particular bill. I will start with a story because sometimes it's important that people understand why these things are necessary and why this is so important. Imagine a musician taking long hours in the studio to record, which in itself has a cost attached to it. That same person, also being a songwriter, spends countless hours writing and trying to perfect their craft. Has the opportunity to travel to the United States, only to find on the streets a gentleman trying his very best to sell me my own music. Yeah. And unfortunately, back in the day, in those times, the legislation worldwide was not comparable. And so therefore, there was absolutely nothing that one could do. But that is just the story of myself. It is the story of many, many more artists and artisans across the Caribbean region, and in Barbados in particular. So it is important that we begin to understand the importance of this. What I believe it will do is, one, it will encourage innovation among our younger population because they know that their works are going to be protected. That is one. Two, it also gives us the opportunity to really, and I will put it as simply as this, to protect our heritage. You know, we take a lot of things for granted. I remember there was a huge hullabaloo, so to speak, some years ago when a young lady here did some crochet and it went worldwide. And because one of our major icons, Rihanna, was a recipient of that, there was this, I don't even know what word I would use, but it was this vast acknowledgement of crochet as something fantastic and new. This is something that most of us in here would have seen our grandparents doing, your great-grandparents doing, people in villages doing for little or nothing, creating out of basically, you know, nothing, these wonderful pieces that are wearable in some instances, but usable in other instances where they have mats and all the other things. Imagine that someone on the outside of Barbados picks up this and decides that, oh, this is ours. And then all of that is lost. There is a story of a young man in St. Philip, not very well known, but who with a number of his friends got together and took shocks from car and shocks from motorcycles and put them on a bicycle and rode it through St. Philip. The story goes that they were stopped by a visitor and asked to look at it, and after some years later they saw shocks on bicycles across the world. Sounds unfamiliar to those persons who are not in that creative space. But these are some of the things that a number of our people have suffered from in silence. And so it is extremely, again, important, and I applaud all those persons who have worked diligently on this particular bill to get it before us. And I hope that my little intervention will encourage some of our younger aspiring artists and artisans to learn ask questions about copyright and IP and all of these different things, intellectual property. Understand it. If you don't, trust me when I tell you, there are many opportunities that you will lose, because just as we are making the laws, there are people all across the world who are intent on breaking these laws, and they will not be able to be prosecuted in Barbados, but they can take the works and do what they want with them. And again, I have had the privilege of being in LA and seeing, this was in the days of records, and seeing a record entitled The Spooge Kings. And the two persons who were on the record, no way, form, shape, or fashion represented the greatest two at that particular point in time. And I'm sure that these were all just copies of the very songs that those guys would have created, but there was no way and nothing that you could do about it. And so, Mr. President, again, I just really felt compelled to at least say a few words on this matter, and I'm sure that the artistic community themselves are clapping and are very happy. So once again, to all of those concerned, a heartfelt thank you very much, and I'm obliged to, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator King. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further deliberation on this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself in committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Honourable, the Senate is now in committee.
Seek your permission, sir, to take the bill in parts. Part 1, clauses 1 through 5.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 through 5 do now stand part.
The question is, Part 1, clauses 1 through 5 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 6 to 18.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 6 through 18 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 6 through 18 do stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 19 to 26.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 19 through 26 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 19 through 26 do stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 27 to 33.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 27 through 33 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 27 through to 33 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 34 through 54.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 34 through 54 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 34 through to 54 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 55 through clauses 94.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 55 through 94 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 55 through 94 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 95 to 110.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 7, clauses 95 through 110 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 7, clauses 95 through 110 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 111 to 114.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 111 to 114 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 111 through 114 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 115 to 163.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 115 to 163 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 9, clauses 115 to 163 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 10, clauses 164 to 166.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 10, clauses 164 to 166 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 10, clauses 164 to 166 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 11, clauses 167 and 168.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 11, clauses 167 and 168 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 11, clauses 167 and 168 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 12, sir. Clauses 169 to 185.
Mr. Chairman, finally, I beg to move that Part 12, clauses 169 through 185 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 12, clauses 169 to 185 do now stand part. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the President the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Copyright Act 2025.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Copyright Act 2025. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I want to thank all of the honourable senators for their contributions today and beg to move that, having concluded government's business for today, that the Senate adjourn until Wednesday, October 2025 at 11 a.m. Beg to move that the Senate be adjourned until Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. What did I say?
The question is that the Honourable Senate do now adjourn until Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025 at 11 a.m. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned until Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025 at 11 a.m.